Hey, I'm Natalie, and welcome to the Dyslexia in Adults podcast. I believe that dyslexia is holding you back in your career and impacting your daily life, and ultimately slowly chipping away at your confidence. And I just simply don't think that is good enough. I don't care when you were diagnosed, if your boss is a total dick, or if, like me, you roll your eyes heavily when dyslexia is called a superpower. I know I can change how you feel about your brain. This week's episode of the podcast is a little bit different, and I hope you are going to all really enjoy this. Onyinye and I have been talking for a while about the Black dyslexic experience, and we wanted to throw the conversation open on exactly what is going on with the Black experience and how we can help dyslexic Black people feel more empowered, feel better educated, and really create more success in their life. So passing over to Onyinye, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself and then we're going to dive straight into the conversation?
Thank you so much, Natalie, for such a warm introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Onyinye Udokporo. I am building a portfolio career, which is classic for a dyslexic individual. So I'm an educator, I'm an entrepreneur, published dyslexic author, neurodiversity consultant, and content creator.
Amazing. So, like I said, we've been having conversations on and off for the last few months about being Black and being dyslexic. And obviously, this is something that you are very passionate about. In terms of from your perspective, like, where does that passion come from? Like, what is it that is driving your interest in dyslexia, but particularly in the Black community?
So it comes from my lived experience. I always go all the way back to my first diagnosis of dyslexia, which was at the very privileged age of 11. And I say privileged because many people from my community will go a lifetime of being dyslexic and never knowing, because they either can't access diagnosis, or even if they are able to access diagnosis, it's something that's kind of frowned upon. So they don't really go for it. When I sat down with one of my teachers and they explained that I'm dyslexic, they printed out 3 pictures, one of Albert Einstein, one of Jamie Oliver, and one of Richard Branson. And they said, there's nothing to worry about. You've got this thing called dyslexia. It's a learning difficulty. I now like to call it a learning difference, because I think the way we talk about dyslexia is really important. And I'm sure we'll delve deeper into that conversation a bit later. But the images of the 3 white men, of which I felt were 3 middle-class white men, being shown to a Black working-class girl, because I was still a child at the point of diagnosis, really jarred me. And I went back to my boarding house, and I went to boarding school on scholarship, and I went back to my boarding house and I Googled Black dyslexic individuals, Black dyslexic people. And it took me to get to about page 7, I'll never forget, before Whoopi Goldberg showed up. And so my passion for talking about the Black dyslexic experience is not the only thing I talk about, but I like to talk about it, particularly when it comes to intersectionality, which I know is something you want to touch on today. It stems from that young Onyinye who felt so lost, so hopeless, so worthless, so broken. I felt as though that there was something inherently wrong with me, and that Black people can't be dyslexic, because I'd never seen it before. So I've always lived with this sense of purpose, but also a mission to be a seen Black dyslexic individual, so that no other 11-year-old Onyinye has to go through that experience that I went through.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I completely resonate. I had the same posters at school. It was Albert Einstein, Richard Branson, and I just looked at them and I was like, how does that help me? Like, what? Okay, that's nice, but I want a path. I want an explanation. I'm glad that they're successful, but what do I need to do? Yeah. And I felt like that being a privileged white person. And I can only imagine like one step further of like what that must have felt like, because I remember how angry I used to feel looking at those posters. So yeah, I think that piece of having your community being represented and realizing what they're trying to do with the posters is like, they can do it, you can do it, but it needs to be, like you said, intersectional and clear on, okay, let me get specific to little Onyinye and like help her feel empowered.
I think it's really important for me to stress that everything is with good intention.
100%.
Because I don't want people to listen to this and think, oh, so are you saying that we can't use white examples for Black people? That is not what I'm saying at all. But let's go back to the examples that I've just spoken about and which you've shared. Richard Branson, Jamie Oliver, Albert Einstein. And Richard, Jamie, if you somehow come across this podcast, we've got nothing against you, okay? Like, there's no beef between us, but it's important for us to...
I'd like them to stop calling it a superpower, actually.
Yeah, okay. That's a conversation for another day. But my first gripe, and something that the two of us share, why were we shown 3 men? Do you understand? I'm talking about the Black experience. I need to add something to that phrase, the Black female experience, because it's very, very different. And there's a whole heap of prejudice that comes up in a range of Black cultures, because within the Black culture, there are so many different Black cultures. But the culture of which I am from, my family are Igbo, and I'm the firstborn child in the family, but I'm also the first female child, which makes me something called the Ada. There is a lot of pressure already put on me in the position that I hold. And then to add dyslexia on top is a whole kettle of fish, which I hope to really break down. And I know that there are similar Black cultures that where women have these roles and these, I guess, these roles that they have to play up to, these expectations that they have to live up to, that dyslexia doesn't necessarily fit in with. So there's lots for us to talk about today, for sure.
And I wanted to kind of start, like I said, I wanted to just really dive straight in. And we were talking earlier about, obviously, you're dealing with the fact that you're a woman, you're dealing with the fact that you're Black, and now you're dealing with the fact that you're dyslexic as well. And the goal that we've shared about this piece of work we want to do is we want to empower Black people who are listening to this and help them feel like their experience has been explained or understood as much as we possibly can. And what I would really love to hear some of your thoughts about those 3 things at play and what that feels like and how hard that can be. And you touched on something again so beautifully earlier when we were kind of doing some prep for this about you're already unlikely to go for that promotion or already at so much difficulty around going forward in your career. And now we've added another brick to the backpack, which is the thing I always like to describe it like. Not only am I dyslexic, but I've got my confidence knocked, and I've got all of these bricks, and you're adding the Black brick as well. And I'm so passionate about wanting people to go for their dreams when they're dyslexic and to not let dyslexia hold them back. So could you talk a little bit about what it feels like to have all of those bricks in your backpack?
Yeah. So let's focus on the Black brick to begin with. And disclaimer, I am not here speaking on behalf of the entire Black race. This is still very subjective to my experience. However, my postgrad degree, I studied education policy and sociology. So I've always been academically very interested in how race plays a role in the way not only we are perceived, but the way we experience things. The Black experience without dyslexia, let's talk about it in the workplace, because I know a lot of work that you do is for adult individuals, which means that there's a lot of work that you do within dyslexia in the workplace. As the Black individual, we are already less likely to go for that promotion. We are already perceived in a certain way, mainly because of how the media depicts us. Let's take Black women. If we are passionate, at times it is misunderstood as aggressive, okay? If we look a certain way, today I have my natural hair out, which is something that I actually consciously think about. I think about, do I want to go into this environment with my natural hair, or do I want to wear a wig that makes me fit a more Eurocentric, accepted version of me, for example. We've not even spoken about colorism within the Black experience. I'm quite, do I call it fortunate? It's not even something that's fortunate, but I'm not the darkest shade of Black that there is, for example. So there's that prejudice to deal with as well. So when I go into the workplace, I am hyper conscious of my passion. I don't want that to be perceived as aggressive. I am hyper conscious of my skin tone, not only amongst non-black folk, but also within the black community. I'm not even like the fairest or the darkest, but there's a whole conversation to be had about that. And then I'm also hyper conscious of the fact that I'm different and the fact that I'm othered, and I come from a loaded history where my ancestors kind of had to fight for me to be here, and I'm still continuing that fight. That is a burden in and of itself. Okay. Then we add the dyslexic experience, the neurodivergent experience. I have to process all of these things. And as you know, with dyslexia, we struggle with processing. And I have to learn to show up to work on time. I have to make sure that I am responding to emails properly, that I am writing emails properly, that I'm not spelling incorrectly, because here's an intersection. There is sadly a misconception that a lot of black people are not educated. So a compliment, well, people think it's a compliment. I don't really know how to take it, but I get this said to me a lot. Oh, wow, you're so articulate. And it's kind of like, what were you expecting?
I mean, this pisses me off alone with dyslexia. I can't even imagine with the black element as well. When people get confused that you're smart because you're dyslexic, you're like, sorry, no one said I couldn't be smart. Like,
Yeah.
and even because of how many times people have wanted me to be stupid,
Yeah.
it's taken me years to accept that I'm smart. Even to just sit here and say, I think I'm smart, was like a moment, was a breath of like, I can say this, like, I truly believe it. And then when people are shocked to receive you as like having a good vocabulary, being intelligent, having unique takes, and you're like, I'm dyslexic. Like, why did you think that I wasn't capable? And it really, it grinds my gears.
So now let's bring those two bricks together. So I've just told you, I am grappling with this misconception that people have of my passion for aggression. I am also having to learn to be confident in the way that I look, learn to be confident in going in with my natural hair. And even with the natural hair, I'm going to be completely real with you. I would think twice before going into a workspace, into a corporate space with my afro like fully out. There is a reason why it is neatly in a bun, and there is lots of leave-in conditioner and lots of wax in it to keep it slicked back and contained. These are things that we have to think about. I'm not saying that my white or Eurocentric counterparts don't have to think about this, but the level to which I have to contend with this.
It's that extra brick in your backpack.
Exactly. Yeah. Then I have to also think about, am I good enough for that work promotion? Will there be any prejudice? In fact, I often, when I'm working with a corporate client, I do this. I will go to their About Us page. I will look at senior leadership. I will see how many faces of colour are within senior leadership, because that will give me an indication as to whether I've even got a chance. Whether this is true or not, conversation for another day. But these are things that I have to process alongside, be on time, spell properly, read properly, be organized. Don't let your anxiety show through. My anxiety is as a result of my dyslexia. Keep your bowels under control, because anxiety triggers the IBS and it's a downward spiral. So you can imagine the black experience of being dyslexic is not just about your dyslexia. Your race plays such a big part of your life. And I'm talking about the black female experience. We don't have enough time today for me to delve into the black male experience, and I don't think it would be right for me to do so because I don't identify as a man. But from what I have seen, they have a whole other challenge, which is having the courage to be vocal when they need help, because black men are often depicted as big, strong, they don't need help. And even if they do, they don't talk about it. This is something that is within the culture and also how they are perceived. So you can imagine there's lots of things at play here. And, you know, not that we want people to get their violins out and start playing, you know, a sad song for us, because it's not that at all. But I think these things need to be acknowledged. They need to be spoken about. It is so tough. It is so tough. And it's part of the reason why I made the bold decision to not formally work for one organization, particularly in the corporate sector.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. I think this is really interesting. Yeah, I really love when you talk about this. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's exactly what we were talking about of that backpack piece, is that masking is so exhausting when you're neurodiverse. Like, it's not just that things are harder for us, it's that we're also doing all of that work to mask. Like, all of those extra times we're spell checking something, the amount of times we're sat in a meeting pretending that we understand when secretly we don't.
Yep.
Or like worrying whether or not you've forgotten something, but you're too embarrassed to ask. So you just have to kind of hope and pray and like push your stress down. And you've got all of that masking of neurodiversity, and then all of that masking coming from being Black as well.
Yeah.
And just that mental load that you're taking on alongside the fact that you're already struggling with processing. It's just incredibly frustrating. So you talk quite honestly and openly about choosing to step away from a role in the Big Four and how that went down with your parents.
One parent was all in favor. Dad, I love you. But I know you weren't always happy about that decision. He's very happy now. But at the time, he was a bit like, are you sure you want to do that? From his perspective, it was, you're saying no to stability. And again, his intersectionality as a woman, maternity leave, consistent pay, perceived less stress, because that's what he felt. So it came from a good place, but it was very interesting seeing. Whereas my mother, who's a natural entrepreneur, my grandmother's an entrepreneur, I come from a generation of entrepreneurial giants. They were both like, it's in the genes, you'll be fine as a businesswoman.
And we think your mum has dyslexia as well,
no,
right?
she is, and my mother's also dyslexic.
Yeah.
And gosh, that woman is my inspiration, my role model, my source of joy, the person that keeps me doing the work that I'm doing, because she didn't have a me to lift her up. And I hope mum doesn't mind me saying this, but she's in her 50s, early 50s, although she looks 10 years younger. And I think had somebody like myself been around advocating for dyslexic individuals, Black dyslexic individuals, female dyslexic individuals, she would have had the courage to pick up that baton and run a lot faster. But I'm glad that she's able to do it now. But this is part of why I do what I do. It's because I know that there are several generations of people from my community who need my voice so they can amplify theirs. So when we're talking about me stepping away from the Big Four, that was the one reason why I did it. The other reason why I did it is because I could see that I just did not fit into that world at the time. That world is slowly changing. We still have a long way to go. But I figured that I would be of more value and I would create better impact, greater impact, if I served the corporate space by teaching them about dyslexia and neurodiversity and how best to support people like me so that people like me can thrive. And I hope you don't mind me doing this classic dyslexic move, classic Leo move to like just take over the interview. But I really want to talk about why so many dyslexic individuals, Black dyslexic individuals, end up in entrepreneurship, why they leave the workplace. Because that prejudice that we face from the color of our skin, in combination with the prejudice we face from being dyslexic or having any other neurodivergent condition, actually is so exhausting, is so tiring. There's two things I find that we do. We either go into contracting or freelancing because the systems are set up against us, quite literally. There's no room for progression. Or if you pluck the courage to say that you're dyslexic or have any other condition that you're dealing with, you find that your career kind of stops, like you don't really progress. So yeah, we either go into contracting or freelancing, or we just leave and we set up businesses.
Yeah, because putting a pin in the entrepreneurial piece for a second, because I do really want to go back to that. But I'm interested because part of me says, and the big part that we're trying to do with dyslexia in adults is you can do any job. Yeah. There is no role, no job, no institution that dyslexic people cannot thrive in. And just to give you a sense of that, I had a conversation with someone last week who said to me, I want to move. He's a consultant working at a small firm. And he said, it's been 5 years I've been saying that I'm going to move jobs and I just don't have the courage and I'm too scared. And I want to move into one of the big firms. And I was like, oh yeah, well, we work with a few of the big corporate companies that to do with consulting. You know, there's plenty of dyslexic people in there. And he's like, dyslexic people work at BCG McKinsey. Like,
Yeah.
he was actually shocked
Yeah.
that dyslexic people are actually successful in these roles. And so, you know, part of me really wants to say, you truly could have been absolutely astonishing in that role.
Yeah.
But you're obviously really thriving in entrepreneurship. But for the people who do want that corporate ladder and are interested in going down that approach, because I know how much I self-censored myself, and I'm really so determined that people stop self-censoring when it comes to dyslexia. What would you say to them if they're kind of looking it down going, no, she's right, I don't want a mask because I'm black, I don't want to think about how my hair looks, and I don't want to think about like how I have to behave or whether or not I seem too passionate, and like the last thing I want to think about is my dyslexia on top of that. What would you say to them?
For those who want to go into the corporate sector, own whatever space you want to go into, but be aware that you will need to have the confidence to advocate for yourself if you want to be in that space. And the truth is, I was due to start working in the corporate sector when I was 22, so that was 4 years ago. I did not have the confidence that I have now to advocate for myself.
Confidence is
everything.
It's everything.
And when I had already asked, is there any chance I could stop getting emails in font size 12 Times New Roman, no line spacing, because I actually can't read it, and there was no change, 22-year-old Onyinye said, you know what, there's no change, back out, because can you imagine getting hundreds of these types of emails every single day? 26-year-old Onyinye would email again and say politely, hi, I've already asked. Any chances this could be changed? Or like, who can I speak to who's more senior, who can make the change? And that's the difference. That's
confidence.
It's confidence. I have grown as an individual in myself. Now, what I've done...
Don't see yourself as less than.
Exactly.
And like, that is the problem, is that we think that we're a problem for emailing and asking. Because who enjoys size 12 font? And too many emails, guys.
Too many
emails. And you think that... oh, like, I'm so it's like you're coming into the position and being like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I know, you know, it's probably seems small, but would you be able to like change the font? No. Exactly like you said. It's like, this font size is too small. I can't read it. And so can, by the way, 20% of the people you are sending this email to, if not more, if we consider other like difficulties as well with vision. And going in with that kind of stance, it will get so much respect, so much appreciation. And the other thing I would also say is, and I say this to people all the time, I have to respect listening to the red flags and like watching out for them, because the amount of people who I have heard gone into interviews, had conversations and been like, oh, could I have this? I could have had this. And, you know, they've been unaccommodating, they've been unsupportive, and they've kind of just dived in being like, oh, it'll be fine. No, it won't be fine. And you deserve to work for an organisation that will care and will make a difference, and those organizations exist.
Here's the other piece though. As well as me growing in confidence in terms of advocating for myself, for my dyslexia, I've also grown in confidence in who I am as a Black woman. Me sitting here with my natural hair is a very, very big deal. Me doing, you know, having work or working in like the media or like in a public facing role, being confident in who I am. You know, most people know I love wearing a bit of tailored clothing that was made in Nigeria with my Ankara print in full, for example. Me having the confidence to do that is a big thing, because it means I had the confidence to show up as simply me. There are so many Black individuals who will listen to this podcast who I can guarantee you almost put on like a coat of a different character to go into the workplace, to fit in, to assimilate, to not seem like they are other. And being able to grow in strength in both as a Black individual has made thriving with my dyslexia a lot easier. Because I'm confident, I no longer see my passion or my ability to advocate for myself politely, because there is a way to do it, because there is a way to advocate.
Confidence doesn't mean rude.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean rude. Like, it can still be polite.
Exactly.
It just means you're not coming in with the starting point of believing that you are a burden.
Exactly.
That's the baseline.
Yeah.
And just to kind of, one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and one of the reasons we don't do interviews a lot on the podcast, is because I often feel like people don't give the path to it. So one of the things we always want to help people with is giving them the path to whatever we're talking about, and helping people like see what they have to do to achieve that. So you're saying, you know, turning up with your natural hair is tricky, and sending that second email felt tricky.
Yeah.
And, you know, wearing your more cultural clothes feels tricky. What was the path to making it not feel tricky, to making it feel natural, authentic, easy, simple? Like, what were the steps that you took to bridge that divide?
The first step I took was introspection, if I'm being completely honest. So I'll kind of go into a bit more detail with regards to that. I took a moment to just forget about what everybody else thought about me and ask myself, what do you think about yourself?
100%.
And the moment I was able to come up with an answer that I was confident with and happy with, I created the version of myself I was happy with for other people to see. So, for example, so many people relate to this. In my late teens, very, very early 20s, and I'm going to disclaimer again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with wearing wigs. But I had my first ever work experience in a law firm. I'll never forget this. I was still a student. I thought I was going to be a barrister. Really big chambers. I was doing my mini pupillage, and I remember calling my mum and saying, "Mum, that's it. I'm going to go and get my first wig. It's going to be a slick bob because I need to fit in to this like persona. I need them to see me as one of them." So I get this wig. It's a frontal. All my Black ladies listening to this will know, do not get a frontal as your first ever wig. Whatever you do, get a closure. So I'm running late. Already I'm dyslexic, so I can't read the Google Maps. I was running late as it was. As you know, that's just something that we deal with.
We've run late a few times today.
Exactly. And then on top of that, I couldn't glue this wig down because I'd never had a wig before. But I felt that I have to go into this workplace with this wig. I need it to be laid down so they know I'm part of them. My goodness, when I had gone through that journey, by the way, it rained, so the glue, like, it got wet. The glue just didn't stick. By the time I got there, the wig was like halfway up my head. I looked so off. And then when I got there, I was like they dumped a whole heap of papers for me to read. I was frazzled. So when you ask me, like, what was the process of that introspection, I think back to that I was 19-year-old Onyinye, and I actually want to go and slap her around the face and say, girl, you were doing all of this so that you could tick certain boxes, and then on top of that, you weren't looking after your dyslexia, because this is another thing. You need to look after your dyslexia. Looking after it, this is the next step. So one, I asked myself, you know, are you comfortable with who you are, and how do you want people to see you? But more importantly, how do you see you? When I saw myself with my wig halfway, like, up my head, frazzled, I already know that this ain't it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I realized I needed to look after my dyslexia. I needed a dyslexia coach. I really needed that dyslexia coach, and there was no shame in getting that. I needed to read on yellow paper. I needed to write on yellow paper. I needed to send emails with a yellow background sometimes. And I needed to not be apologetic about it, because I need this. If you need to get the best work from me, I need these things, and I'm not going to say sorry for having these things. I would say the third thing I did in terms of getting confident is I started consuming content about dyslexia from individuals who looked like myself, so that I could see that it is possible to be me. So I hope doesn't mind me calling her a dear friend, but Marcia, I'm sure you'll come across this on Instagram. She's known as the Black Dyslexic. She has been championing us for years. Marcia's old enough to be my mum, so I consider her like a mum. She's like the mother of us all in this space. She's been advocating for dyslexia for years. And when I found her, I believe I found her on Instagram for the first time. It was a bingo moment for me, because I do believe that, like, to believe it, you've got to see it. To become it, you've got to see it. So seeing someone who was round about my mother's age really killing it as a dyslexic woman, proudly dyslexic, proudly Black and dyslexic, made me realize that I can and I will thrive. And it's got to be one step at a time. And I remember connecting with her for the first time, and I had this sense of home, which is another reason why I'm doing this, because I want Black dyslexic people who are watching this, who are listening to this, who are probably laughing at that image of me with my wig halfway back down my head, okay, all in the name of trying to fit in. I hope they feel that sense of home and they see that element of themselves. It's so important. But that's how I was able to kind of make the push forward. I like to do the rule of 3. So if anyone like doesn't care about the anecdotes, first step is asking yourself how you want to see you. Second step is being able to look after your dyslexia. Get the support that you need, get the help that you need, and be unapologetic about the help that you need. Third, look for someone that looks like you. They may not have the same experience as you, but just being able to see someone with a little bit of similarity to you can help you move forward and really thrive as a Black dyslexic individual.
I think for me, because I really struggled with confidence and honestly, sometimes still do, the bit for me was exactly what you said of that introspection is I kind of healed how I felt about myself and how I thought about myself. And I often say on this podcast that one of the statistics that floored me is that a child with ADHD by the age of 12 has received 20,000 additional negative criticisms.
Wow.
By the time they are 12. And like, I'm 32 and I know that it's like well over like 20,000. And by starting to realize that I'm okay with me, I think I'm smart, I think I've got something to add, I think that I'm a valuable employee, I don't think the things I'm asking for are too much, I started to kind of feel my way into doing that externally. But it was doing the work internally to like deal with those criticisms and realize how harmful they were.
But I hope you don't mind me interjecting here. A couple of years ago, I did a piece. I wrote an article for Black Ballad. It's an amazing publication platform run by an amazing Black woman. And yeah, check it out, guys. Black Ballad is a great place to read really good articles. I'm not just saying that because my article did really well. I promise. But putting that aside, and I spoke about the importance of neurodivergent individuals, dyslexic individuals having just one champion. And so as much as it's important for you to believe I am enough, I am good enough, I'm not asking for too much, it's really important to find your tribe. And that tribe only has to be one person. My champion was always my mother.
It's always the
mums.
Yeah.
It's always the mums. My mum has been my champion from day one. So that 20,000 statistic of negative comments and criticisms, I cannot remember a time where my mother like criticized my dyslexia or criticized something that I did as a result of my learning difference. This is so important because I sit here at 26 years old, probably with the confidence of a 50-year-old woman, because she's made me believe I can and I will do anything I set my mind to, even if it's delusional. And because of that, I've done some pretty delusional things. So it is so important, whoever is listening to this, do not let them deceive you. Find your tribe.
I feel so bad. I used to spend hours arguing with my mum about, she would like say like, you know, it's okay that you need to do this, or it's like, it's okay that you're like this, or like, it's not a problem. And I used to argue with her that it was a problem, and she used to argue back with me that it wasn't. And now I feel like I've kind of like taken on her baton of being like, no, it isn't a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you and I could talk all day. And kind of almost have been all day, like before spending time together. There's kind of two other things that we want to make sure we cover. And, we started delving into that entrepreneurial piece, and I want to circle back there. So one of the things that I live in Lewisham, and for anyone that doesn't know, Lewisham is kind of quite a high, like Afro-Caribbean area.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've really noticed about like Lewisham particularly and the Afro-Caribbean culture is the power of entrepreneurship within that community. And I think exactly like you said, like a lot of people are just done with the corporate world and they're just not interested in fitting in. And so they're just removing themselves from it. Yeah. And one of the things that I've seen a lot is how powerfully that merges with the like entrepreneurial drive of dyslexic people. And obviously, when you and I have talked about this in the past, obviously there's a strong drive for, you know, the parents to kind of the more quintessential roles. You've said you wanted to be a lawyer. You went into the big four. Like,
I was going to be a doctor first. I've ticked every box. All my Nigerians will know: lawyer, doctor, accountant, engineer. They're not trying to hear anything else. I'm trying to change that.
And so, like, I've really seen from afar the power of those two things, of, like you said, feeling pushed out of the kind of the normal workforce, but also the grit and determination that the kind of the Black experience has given you, and that the dyslexic experience has given you, and the ideas of dyslexic people, and how powerful that is. And I think it's just been something that's kind of like really warmed my heart to watch. And I would be really interested to hear like your perspective on, you know, is that the route? Is that the path? Or really, is it just something that, you know, some people should do and feel powerful and excited by? Like, what's your perspective on that?
As an entrepreneur that started at the age of 12, had to slip that in there. It's been a long time. My mum started at the age of 8, so she beats me again. But of course, I'm going to advocate for everyone to be some sort of entrepreneur. However, I don't think we talk enough about intrapreneurship. So what I'm not going to do is tell everyone to listen to this podcast, quit their very stable jobs. Probably they have mortgages and bills they need to pay, all in the name of becoming an entrepreneur without a plan. Please don't do that.
And you and I know how stressful it is.
We know how stressful it is. Please don't do that, okay? However, I think we need to start talking about how we can integrate entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial skills or elements of being a business person in corporate workplaces.
Yes, 100%.
That is what
and it's getting appreciated.
It is.
You just got to find your voice.
Find your voice. It's so important. I'm a big advocate for being an entrepreneur, but at the same time, I'm going to be honest and say it is not for everyone. There is a certain level of grit and determination, and most importantly, resilience that one has to have to be able to be a successful entrepreneur. You will hear no millions of times before you hear yes. Fact. That is how it goes.
And the failures are public.
Very, very
humiliating.
Public. I have launched so many things and had either one or no one take it up. Fact.
It's life.
I've had to get used to that.
You learn so much through the failures.
In my consulting business, I have pitched to so many corporates, and sometimes I've never heard back, or it's just been a straight up no, followed by and also don't contact us again because we're not interested.
Don't send that second email.
Yeah, exactly. Don't follow up. Don't chase us up. We don't want you. You have to be so willing to be repeatedly bruised in the same spot with entrepreneurship that if you are not emotionally ready for that, don't do it. But do think about ways you can be an intrapreneur. You can start something in an organization that not only increases its revenue, and I say that intentionally because let's be real, corporates are here to make money. That's what the world is all about. So you could start something that it creates a new revenue stream for your organization or increases revenue, or you could be part of a process that improves the systems and the operations of that organization so they save money. I hate to sound like a capitalist, but we're talking about the business world, we're talking about the corporate sector. This is the stuff that really matters to people in that sector. There you are showing entrepreneurship within the organization, and I think we need to champion that lots and lots. I do think that one of the beauties, and again, because we've spoken quite a bit about race today, one of the beauties of being able to run your own business, I'm not saying that I don't experience racism, I still do, it's different. But I am able to control the experience of racism a lot more. If you get what I mean. I'll give you an instance. If I have a client that has treated me in a way where I feel that there's racial prejudice, I can just say goodbye and not serve that client again. If I work in an organization where I have to go into the office every single day and face the same prejudice every single day, or even it be hybrid and I'm just receiving this constant vitriol and abuse because of the color of my skin, that would really be deprecating for me. I think it would really bring down my morale, and I wouldn't be able to continue working in a smart and efficient way. So one of the reasons why entrepreneurship worked for me is not just in terms of race, but in terms of everything. I have a lot more control. And I think a lot of dyslexic people, as much as we may portray as disorganized or messy or scatty, or you like to say chaotic,
extremely chaotic,
we are also big on control. I've spent the day working with you, and I followed your work for a long time, and as much as you say I'm just chaos, it's controlled chaos as far as I'm concerned.
It's got some guardrails.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Well, I think that I said this to you earlier. I think there's two types of dyslexic people. There's stressed and organized.
That's
and
me.
There's like not stressed and disorganized.
Yeah.
And I definitely in the latter. Most people, I more you, they're super stressed, super anxious, and then really organized as a result of that.
Yeah.
I'm living carefree, but there is consequences of my carefree way.
But it's a controlled carefree. And so coming back to your question about is entrepreneurship the way forward for dyslexic individuals, particularly for Black dyslexic individuals, yes, but there are different types of entrepreneurship. So I really am going to stress this. Please don't listen to this podcast today and go and quit your job. That's not the message I'm trying to advocate for. If you feel that there is a natural progression for you to do so, if your side hustle is now taking up a lot of time and it means you're not able to give the 9 to 5 or whatever your full-time job is the time that it requires, then a considered plan to transition into being a full-time entrepreneur makes sense. But look at entrepreneurship. Look at how you can bring entrepreneurship to your organization. The key here is look at how you can bring some sort of control into your life, because that is the most important thing, I think, for me personally, just being able to have a sense of control, because dyslexia is so uncontrollable in the way that it shows up.
Ain't that the truth?
It actually has brought me a sense of peace. And there are perks to, working in an organization, which we can talk about maybe another time.
There's two things I want to say about that, and I think that was really powerful. And I sometimes like to really call people out and give people the kind of tough love that truly they deserve.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're going to say one of these two things, then I want you to try and deal with this. Like, I want you to find your voice, to start to have these conversations, to show off these ideas, to have that entrepreneur piece. If you're sitting there and, I've had so many clients come up to me and say, Natalie, I just feel like I'm completely silent. I'm completely mute in meetings. Like, I don't say anything. I just don't know how to say anything. People don't even know I exist. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
Dyslexic people are people. We are idea-centric. You need to be chatty in meetings, putting your ideas forward, sending that email afterwards. And then the second one is, if you are sat there in your meetings and you are not saying your ideas, and 6 months later, I know exactly what's going to happen. Someone else is going to come up with your idea. And if it is a white man, you're going to be so annoyed. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard clients say it. I've done it myself, where you sit there and you have an idea, you have a thought, and you think it's valuable, you think it's interesting to your team, and maybe you're not senior enough, or you're dyslexic and you don't trust yourself, or you don't want to put yourself out there, you don't want to put your head above the parapet. And whatever it is, you don't communicate the idea, and you always regret it, because that is what the secret sauce of dyslexia is. It's these ideas, putting them forward, getting noticed by senior managers, so that people will bear with your dyslexia.
But Natalie, there's one way of summarizing all of that. And I want everyone listening to this to walk away with this phrase as a mantra. Be audacious, be unapologetic, be unashamed. That's all it takes. 3 things. Step 1, be audacious, have the courage to step forward. Step 2, be unapologetic about what you're going to say, as long as it's polite. Please keep it polite.
Sometimes it can be unpolite.
And 3, be unashamed if you make a mistake, because a lot of dyslexic individuals, a lot of the time when I say to them, so why didn't you just do it? Oh, I was scared I was going to make a mistake.
And the over-apologizing.
Oh,
over-apologizing.
I'm so glad I'm out of that part of my life.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I didn't mean to, I'm so sorry. It's just because I'm dyslexic. Wait, whoa. And
Don't be sorry for your existence.
you're giving them the stick to beat them with. Like, you are literally handing over the stick to be like, hi,
Yeah.
here is like me telling you that I know I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So that you can then like
Use it
smack
against
me.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. You're getting on some of my favorite topics. And I'm just conscious of time a little bit, but there's one other thing that I know is really dear to your heart and it's really important we touch on. And that is the stigma that is currently in the Black community around dyslexia. And when we kind of talked earlier about what we wanted to achieve in this podcast, I really hoped and I really believe in the power of people feeling seen and feeling like their experience isn't just them and putting words to their experience. Could you talk a little bit about what it's been like to be Black and be dyslexic and some of the conversations that maybe haven't been as helpful as they could have been?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Today we spent some time together also creating some content, and I asked an elder man in his 70s, do you know what dyslexia is? And he said, oh, isn't it a sickness? Isn't it an illness? And from the conversation that we had, I do believe that this individual probably is dyslexic. They were honest about their struggle at school with reading, writing and spelling. And this individual was from a generation where when you spelt incorrectly, you got smacked, you got flogged at school. It was back in the time where corporal punishment was used. So really painful. And that story I think will stick with me forever. I'm quite emotional thinking about it. But that is another side to the conversation about dyslexia in my community that I so desperately am working hard to dispel these myths. Dyslexia is not a sickness. It's not an illness. It's not a disease. It's not contagious. That's one part. The second part, and I just finished working with BBC Two on a documentary about this. I'm really excited. Dyslexia is not spiritual. It's not a curse. Don't take your child to the pastor in the hope that the pastor or the reverend or the priest or whichever spiritual entity is going to pray and remove this condition from your child. These are two big stigmas in my community. Actually, I'll add a third. Dyslexia is not something to be hidden. Because this is another thing in my community, is that people live in fear of people knowing that they're dyslexic. People live in shame of people knowing that they're dyslexic, and they physically hide themselves and they mentally hide themselves, which is why you're constantly getting clients saying, I'm so silent in my meetings. They are silent in their meetings because they've been brought up with this sense of shame. So the work that I'm doing is, first of all, opening the door for these conversations to be had. The first step is always awareness. Awareness and education.
And the other conversations we had a couple of times today as well is people talking about the power of a diagnosis and how, I mean, I've heard this from, every ethnicity, people being, I didn't want to give them the label.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to know that they were dyslexic. I didn't want them to think that they were stupid. And actually we had an amazing conversation with another Black woman about how the diagnosis for her daughter was life-changing.
Yeah, completely life-changing.
And how it gave her the skills, it gave her the communication abilities, it gave her confidence, it resulted in her going forward in her career. And I think one of the things that we really want to change is that the label is powerful.
So powerful. And for many people who are from Black and ethnic minority communities who have immigrated here, labels, we are in a nation of labels. Labels gets you the help and support that you need.
It gives you the knowledge. It's power.
It's power. But I think more practically, because I have to be so direct talking to my community sometimes, it's not just the power. Do you want the help or not? This is a country where things are documented. It has to be official. I'm going to keep it real with you. My parents are from Nigeria. I love Nigeria. I identify as a Nigerian woman. And in Nigeria, not everything is documented. Therefore, the label, it may not be important. You can still get the help you need with or without the label to a certain extent. It doesn't work that way in the UK. Without the official label of dyslexia, in some circumstances, you won't get extra time for your exams. You won't get a scribe if you need that. You won't get a reader if you need that. So accepting that label is like a key that unlocks the door to all the help you need to get to the next level. Do you get what I mean?
And I think for me, when I hear people talk about, oh, I didn't want to give people the label, it's like, well, people are going to give themselves another label.
Yeah.
And that other label is going to be stupid.
Yeah.
And
choose.
Like everyone who is neurodiverse, there is this knowing inside of like, I'm different.
Yeah.
Like something's not right.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at the way that someone else is handling this situation, and this is not me.
Yeah.
Like there is just this deep knowing, and you can either give that deep knowing a label and an explanation and clarity on like your brain works like this, so therefore you need to do that, or hey, it's not just you that's like this, you know, there's other people like this as well, or like here's the pathway, which is what we always talk about. But if you don't give them that, then they're going to make up their own labels, which is stupid, not good enough, incapable, like too much is the thing that I always say that I used to give myself. When I was undiagnosed ADHD, I was too much. Yeah. I've always said that I felt too much, and I wasn't too much. I was undiagnosed ADHD.
It's not even just that. I remember saying this to you this morning when we first met. You're never too much. You're just passionate. And what you have to do is you have to protect your space sometimes. And when you which is why I'm going back to that thing of find your tribe, find your champion. I'm not saying that you should create an echo chamber of people that just love you, because that's also not healthy to a certain degree. But you dare not keep someone that's telling you that you're too much when you're simply passionate. Protect your space and push out somebody who sees you as too much.
Yeah, there was one thing we talked about earlier that I'd love to kind of recant, is we were talking about the people who maybe are not saying the most helpful things and being a little bit rude, let's be honest, of the things that they're saying. Let's start with unhelpful and maybe rude as well. And I said, you know, obviously, like I said, we want to give people a pathway of like, what do they actually need to do? And so, you know, if someone's saying to you, like, go to the pastor, or like, it's this or it's that, and you know that, you know, it's neurodiversity, and you know,
I get
that
it all the time.
Yeah. And what do you say to these people? How do you handle that?
Again, which version of Onyinye are we talking to? Because if we're talking to 19, 20, 21-year-old, 22, even 23-year-old Onyinye, I would have just sat there and taken it. But the 26-year-old woman that I am now, and I guess because of the job that I have, as some people may not like this response, but I use it as an opportunity to both educate but also highlight the level of ignorance that this individual has in a very, very polite way. The beauty of being a writer and having that book and going through that journey is that you learn how to use words. And words are so powerful. And so the first thing I always do is I never get angry. I never, ever get angry.
But you did say you were forceful.
Yes.
Like you were clear.
I'm very clear, but I'm not angry. And the reason why is because you never want somebody's perception of you to alter your mood or to control your emotions. This is so important, because the next thing you're going to hear is that, dyslexic people, they've got a chip on their shoulder, they're always angry, they always have something to say, they're always making excuses, which is why I never get angry. But I do firmly and clearly state this is not an acceptable thing to say to me or any other dyslexic person. Actually, there are over 700 million of us in the world, okay? And that often makes people sit up and go, oh, yeah. It's not an illness, it's not a disease, but this is what it really is. And can I just stress that people who tend to come to you with that negative energy is just projection. Please understand that they're just projecting an insecurity. Yes. And they're projecting the fact that they're not educated enough on the topic of dyslexia or neurodiversity generally. It's got nothing to do with you. And I think the moment people have the understanding that it's not about you, but it's about the other person, the easier things will be.
Yeah, and that's where we talked about healing that piece internally.
Yeah,
those things stop having as much weight.
Yes.
Thank you so much for everything today. I hope everyone has really enjoyed this conversation, and we've got some kind of videos going out alongside this as well, and found this really valuable. I've kind of seen the challenges that are going on inside the community, and it's so tricky because you have this beautiful phrase like nothing like about me without me.
Yeah.
And you know, I am really interested and passionate about this topic. And I'm just really grateful for you for taking the time to educate me, but also kind of take us on this journey and this conversation. It's just been an absolutely beautiful day and yeah, really just profound conversation. So thank you so much for your time. And I really hope everyone else has found it really valuable.
Thank you for having me. And I hope that we can have a conversation again sometime soon.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Dyslexia in Adults podcast. Whether or not this is your first listen or your 100th, I am so grateful that you decided to entrust me with this challenge. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could review and subscribe to the podcast because it really helps us to reach more people.